Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Howe, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the Canes for the touchdown. Howe showing the toughness for 6. Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Throws to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll it apart. Now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Payson in the end zone for the touchdown. They are throwing this left-handed. Was walking out on the run and threw it left-handed. Nard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Vlog podcast, live from Orlando, Florida, here on a little family vacation. So things have been a little jumbled up. We haven't necessarily been able to talk to you guys as much as we have wanted to over these last handful of days to talk about the commitments that Carolina is landing in the 2027 class. Also update you on the official visit weekend that Carolina just had. And there's some freshman enrollment news that we got to jump in on as well. So make sure that you stick around here on this edition of the podcast. There is an update on Keon Chapman that we have to get to. That certainly is something that I think is going to excite a lot of fans to be able to hear something about that after, he didn't enroll with the team back in the spring. There was some questions as to whether or not he would enroll. So we'll get to that later on in this edition of the podcast. But as I mentioned, live from Orlando, Florida, home of current cornerback for the Tar Heels, Jalen Thompson. And there have been a few other Tar Heels that, of course, have been from here as well. I don't know if you guys do this whenever I go on family vacations, especially to the state of Florida, where Carolina's had a lot of players that have come through the program. You get familiar through recruiting with some of the guys that you're recruiting out of those spots or that have been on the roster through that spot. So I like to play the fun game of going down the coast of Florida and remembering some Tar Heels from certain areas of Florida. So, yeah, I know I'm a nerd. I know you guys are too, though, that are watching this podcast. So lock in and enjoy it here today. But the one thing that I did want to start out with before we get into all the Tar Heel stuff is the national storyline that is taking shape with Texas Tech and Brendan Sorsby. I just wanted to make a comment on this real quick because I've seen a lot of other podcasts that have been doing this, just giving their opinions. And yeah, I'm the same as just about everybody else. I mean, when you're agreeing with the NCAA, and it's been a very, very long time since any of us have really agreed with the NCAA all that much, it is pretty amazing to be here. But, this is one of the worst rulings that we've ever seen. It involves, people, the appeals group that allowed this to go through, heavily involved in Texas Tech. A lot of them went to Texas Tech Law School, which is just a joke that they were even a part of this ruling. And that, has college football in a really, really tough spot right now where you've got someone that bet on games that is actively playing in the sport. You've got someone that bet on his own team. He says that, all the gambling, was for his team, wasn't necessarily against his team, but there's no way of telling if that's actually real. I mean, there probably will be more stuff that will come out eventually down the line where we'll be able to find that out. But I mean, it wouldn't be shocking if, how deep this guy is in, if he was someone that actually bet against his own team. I don't know how closely you guys have followed this storyline, but this is a guy that was betting on balls and strikes in baseball, was betting on Turkish league basketball. Like, this guy was in really, really deep. And I feel for him. There's no doubt about that. Stuff like this, especially gambling, can be an addiction that's incredibly difficult to get over. But at the same time, it can't be an excuse for why he's allowed to play the sport of college football. You did the one thing that messes with the game's integrity more than just about anything, which is gamble on the game itself. And so I think at this point, it's ridiculous that he's going to be able to play this season. I think a lot of the schools that are boycotting playing Texas Tech are 100% right in that thinking. And hopefully there are teams that are on the schedule this season that will take that same approach and will say, look, we're just simply not going to play against a guy that's betting on the game, because what's to stop him now? What's to stop any student athlete now? Could be even one of the guys, that we're going to talk about here, or, someone that's on the active roster for the Tar Heels now. This is basically going to become legal because there's nothing that you can do to stop it, is what most people are going to think. And that is a sad, sad day for college sports. College sports is far from where it was, years ago when there was amateurism and everything like that. And I think, for some of us, we want to return to certain aspects of that, a smaller playoff, a smaller postseason just in general, make things, the bowl games matter a little bit more and everything like that. But I mean, this is just next level egregious. And hopefully there's something that college football and the NCAA can do to stop this. And hopefully this will be a guy that won't be playing this year. And look, Brendan Sorsby, if this is a guy that you think, well, maybe you just have some sort of vendetta against him or something like that, I was begging the Tar Heels to get him in the transfer portal. I thought he would be a great fit here. That was before we knew everything that we know now. But I was begging Carolina to bring him in. I thought he would have been a great fit with what he was able to do at Cincinnati last year. This kid should not be playing college football. I'm sorry. I don't care about the mental health toll that it takes on you. That honestly pisses me off that he tries to use that as an excuse, as a reason why you should not serve any sort of punishment. Dude, we all mess up in life. And yeah, mental health is definitely important. But when you mess up, sometimes it takes a toll on your mental health because you have to be punished for it. That's something that should be taking place in this scenario. And unfortunately, it looks like it's not going to. So we'll move on from that topic. We won't focus on that too much, but definitely a storyline that just continues to show you how far away from the previous version of college football we are and how lost this sport seems, especially when you look at, the NBA, where you just have guys that were arrested by the FBI. If you know the story of Terry Rozier, especially if you're someone from the Charlotte area, that was a guy that was arrested by the FBI for betting on games, for doing similar stuff to what Brendan Sorsby could have been doing. Now they have plenty more proof that he sort of altered the directions of games, how they ended up going, wins and losses. But I do think that, you're setting a very dangerous precedent for sports in general, but especially college sports and these student athletes being able to do basically anything they want and affecting the game in a way that they shouldn't be able to. All right, we move on to some news around Carolina football. We're going to focus in the 2027 class here to start off because there is a lot of news around the Tar Heels. And of course, the big news yesterday was Noah Spinks, the 2027 three-star quarterback, ends up committing to Carolina. He committed via social media and commits to Carolina over Utah, whom he officially visited last weekend. Said that, Utah did an amazing job of recruiting him, and it really felt like Carolina was going to have to knock it out of the park in order to be able to land his commitment, not only just this week, but, later on in the process, if he had decided to wait on his commitment. He did not. He saw everything that he needed to at Carolina and ends up committing almost immediately after leaving campus. And so this is a huge, huge get for Carolina in this class. Again, not a highly rated prospect, ranked as the number 1,317 overall prospect and the number 80 quarterback in the 2027 class, according to Rivals industry rankings. That was as of last night. There is a lot of movement that, of course, goes on with these rankings. So if he is a little bit different now, do apologize for that. But look, this is somebody that, even though he might not jump off the page in the rankings respect, I think it's big for Carolina to get a quarterback in here in this class, just in case, again, you end up losing guys to transfer. You end up having guys that eventually, step away from the sport or whatever. You need to make sure that this room has plenty of depth for the future. And I think this is a move that does that. He's 6'1", 205 pounds, and is preparing for his senior season at Summer Creek High School in Houston, Texas. That is a 6A school in the state of Texas, a team that went to the regional final last year behind what Spinks was able to do. This is a really, really talented young man, and somebody that I think, a lot of Tar Heel fans probably look at and aren't necessarily super excited about, but based off of what he did last year, I think you should probably be a little bit more excited than the rankings would have you believe. He threw for 3,690 yards and posted a 43-5 touchdown to interception ratio. He carried the ball just 48 times for 34 yards and a touchdown, but again, was able to lead his team to the 6A Class 2 regional finals. So plays at a very high level in the state of Texas and was very successful at doing so. When you throw on the film of Spinks, I mean, there is a lot to like about what you see. The arm strength, again, might not be the best in the class based off of that ranking that he has, but he definitely has plenty of arm strength to be able to throw the ball down the field. There's enough there. It's not like you're watching Gio Lopez last year, who was not able to really drive the ball down the field. You've got a guy that can do that here. And more importantly, he has really good deep ball accuracy, dropping some throws in between two defenders. Other times dropping it perfectly over the shoulder to wide receivers. Really like what I see there. The best aspect of his game, though, might be his pocket awareness and his escapability. So even though he's not a guy that runs very often, not for positive yardage, he is a guy that does a great job of escaping the pocket, keeping plays alive, and then eventually finding guys downfield. And I think his awareness in the pocket is just great. He can sense pressure from behind. He is a left-handed quarterback, so that's probably something that some people are going to be a little thrown off by when you first throw on his film. But really, I mean, he just does a great job of knowing what he has to do to be able to keep plays alive. And, when he does throw off platform, he looks good. He looks like a guy that has plenty of strength in that arm to be able to make throws, even if his footwork isn't necessarily the cleanest. I think that's one area where he's going to have to become better. He is a guy that probably one thing that you will look to settle down at times. There are some times where there probably are cleaner pockets than he probably believes. He probably is a guy that tucks and runs a little bit too early in certain situations. You want to make sure that he's a guy that can handle some certain pressure, stand in the pocket, and make the throws. But I do like everything that I see from him off platform. And the good news is that even though he is somebody that is out of structure a lot, he's a guy that doesn't really turn the football over. So he does a really good job, a really smart job of finding where the football needs to go. I think at all three levels, he really does a good job of distributing the ball accurately. It seems like, he really favors throwing down the field a lot more in that intermediate and deep passing area. But that short game, when you see it at times on the highlight tape, there are some good throws that he is able to make. And the other thing is again, this is a highlight tape. So you're just going off of what you see there. I think I'm going to have to watch a game of him this season to really get more of an understanding of exactly the type of quarterback that he is. But when you throw for as many yards as he did this past year, and you have the success that he did in the state of Texas, I think there is a lot to like about his game. Again, he's not going to be on the same level as somebody like Travis Burgess. That's the thing that Tar Heel fans have to realize is you're not getting one of the top quarterbacks in this class. But at the same time, you're getting someone that can help you, that is going to be depth for the room, and maybe eventually down the line, ends up becoming a starter for you if enough things break right. I mean, it's a worthwhile risk. And again, it goes back to trusting, the head coach of the Tar Heels, Michael Lombardi, as well, when it comes to evaluating guys, and even Bobby Petrino, current offensive coordinator. This was a guy that Carolina jumped in on late. They gave a late offer to, didn't necessarily have the largest offers at the time. He got Carolina and Utah late in the running, but you got to trust that Bobby Petrino has an eye for talent like this, feels like this is a guy that he's going to be able to, fit into his system and develop in his system. And so hopefully that's something that we see over the next handful of years. He wasn't the only guy that ended up committing to Carolina. Earlier this weekend, this one on Friday afternoon, Carolina ended up landing the commitment of Shavezz Dixon. He ends up committing to Carolina over the other schools in his Final Five: Georgia Tech, Virginia, Florida State, and Pittsburgh. He was scheduled to take an official visit to Florida State or to Virginia over the weekend. Did not end up taking that official visit. Also huge that Carolina beats out in-state Georgia Tech, who's pushing very hard for him. Dixon, 6'4", 305-pound interior offensive lineman who is getting prepared for his senior season at Lee County High School in Leesburg, Georgia. The number 560 overall prospect and number 44 interior offensive lineman in the 2027 class. Currently, according to the Rivals industry rankings this past season, he was named to both the all-conference and all-state teams for what he did. So a guy that on the interior of that offensive line was a force and ends up landing on the Atlanta Journal-Constitution all-state team because of what he was able to do. This is one of my favorite prospects in this class. He was one of the guys that was really high on my list when I put out the most wanted. I believe he was either 5 or 6. And so this is certainly someone that Carolina landing him, I think, is a big deal. And even though he's a 3-star prospect, I think he's a guy that should be in the conversation to be a 4-star prospect. And Carolina did a really good job of being able to land him. It seems like now they've got that interior offensive line spot feeling pretty good in this class with 2 commitments. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a second. But you look at him, he's another player who displays really promising athleticism for his size, which allows him to be used as a pull blocker and a screen blocker. It's one of the things you're really looking for, guys that are athletic enough to be able to get out in space, be able to climb to that second level and make plays for Carolina. I think that's exactly what you get with Shavezz Dixon. He succeeds in driving guys back off the line of scrimmage in the run game, and a lot of that can be attributed to the violence in which he plays most snaps with. So, we've seen some guys that are a little more technical, especially some of the tackles that Carolina has brought in recent years, even going back to the Mac Brown era. You're looking for that violent streak. You're looking for guys that are maulers at certain times, especially in the run game. And I think you see that with Shavezz Dixon. Now, it's not as often as some of the other guys that I went through and took a look at, but I still believe that this is definitely somebody that in this class is going to be able to really anchor the offensive line for Carolina. I really like everything that he brings to the table in the run game. And then in the passing game, there's a violence that shows up in pass protection. It's an area that he really shines in, especially for an interior offensive lineman. And again, when you're on the interior against guys at defensive tackle, it's definitely something that I think you hope that you're going to get. You hope that you're going to get physical interior offensive linemen that are going to be able to make plays, at a consistent level in the passing game, not allow these defensive tackles to get interior pressure. Because, look, it's one thing to get pressure off the edge. Usually you've got quarterbacks that can escape that and make plays. You don't have that when you've got pressure that comes right up the middle. And so hopefully for Carolina, this is somebody that will be able to really fit into the interior of the offensive line. They're going to be, potentially losing guys after this year. Andrew Threed is in his final year of eligibility along the offensive line. Never know what Aiden Banfield is going to necessarily do. And then, of course, the guys that are behind him, you never know what's going to happen in terms of guys entering the transfer portal, all kinds of things like that. And so hopefully, this is somebody that, Carolina values and really looks to develop. And I think, he's a guy that comes in with a lot of talent already. Probably the most talented guy that Carolina's got in this class right now. Just pure talent-wise, I think it makes a little bit of sense based off of the fact that they did lose a commitment here recently from Chuck Roberts, who we'll talk about here in a second. But, Carolina doesn't necessarily have a lot of commits in this class, but this was one that I really felt Carolina needed to value this value and get to Chapel Hill, get him to commit in this class. And so now he's the headliner. He's the only guy ranked inside of the top 900. The next guy they have is Tasheem Butler, who we'll talk about here in just a second. But, there's three other guys that are or four other guys actually in this class, five, that Carolina has that are ranked outside of the top 1,000. So, again, it's not the most purely talented class on paper. It's going to be one that's going to have to be developed as time goes along. But hopefully Dixon is one of those guys that ends up being a gem for Carolina out of this class. And, the good news is they are working on bigger names. There are some four-star prospects that have been on campus recently. One guy, Joshua Vilmeal, the cornerback, actually just received a crystal ball prediction for him late last week. So that is certainly a guy that Carolina is hoping to get in the fold. There are a few other four-star visitors who are going to be on campus this weekend that Carolina holds in high regard. And so hopefully they can end up landing their commitments. But for the time being, Shavezz Dixon is the headliner of this class. And I think he is a more than deserving headliner. I mean, this is someone that, when I looked at him, I saw a very promising player who, depending on what happens at the guard spot this offseason, could see early playing time when he gets to Chapel Hill. So hopefully this is, someone that we'll be talking about in a large capacity here once we're breaking down this class further on early signing day. Carolina's got to make sure they keep the heat on them, because you never know when any of these other schools will try to turn the heat back up here during the season. All right, you move on to Tasheem Butler. Mentioned him as a guy that is a part of Carolina's class, and Carolina ends up getting the news that he is reaffirming his commitment to them. This came from Inside Carolina earlier this weekend. It was on Saturday, and he's been committed to the Tar Heels since March 28th. He reaffirmed his commitment on Sunday, following his official visit. The days, I'm on vacation, so the days are all out of whack here for me. But he did cancel his remaining official visits with Central Florida and Pittsburgh. He did visit Maryland last weekend, and that was the team that a lot of people thought was a big threat to flip him. They thought if he made the visits to Central Florida and Pittsburgh, there could be an opportunity for those schools to do the same. But instead, he sees what he needs to see at Carolina. So a great job by this staff with a guy that was on the verge of potentially being flipped to show him that he is a valued piece in this class. And, when you go back and look at him and what exactly, he's going to bring to Chapel Hill, I think this is a guy that a lot of Tar Heel fans will like what they see production-wise. There are some guys that Carolina has picked up over the last year and a half or so under Bill Belichick that have really been projects, that are guys that you can't look at the stats. You really have to just project what they can eventually become. That's not what you have to do with Tasheem Butler. In 13 games last year, finished with 138 total tackles, a remarkable 34 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 9 quarterback hurries, 1 pass deflection, and a forced fumble. So this is somebody that has the production to go along with the talent. And so hopefully he's going to be someone that can come in and produce early for Carolina, can be a guy that factors into the rotation, maybe not next year, but the year after that for the Tar Heels. He currently is ranked as the number 918 overall prospect and the number 79 linebacker in the 2027 class, according to the Rivals industry rankings. And, just put my scouting report in here, breaking him down a little bit for you guys. If you missed it whenever we broke him down officially after his commitment, really a fun tape to watch. First thing that stands out is the physicality that he plays with. Again, something we really like. We've talked about this defense in years past not being as physical as we would like them to be. At times last year, it showed up, especially in the linebacking core as the season went along. It shows up in a multitude of ways, but especially when he's shedding blocks and meeting ball carriers in the hole. He's a guy who has the speed to play sideline to sideline, and his closing speed when he looks in on a ball carrier allows him to take aggressive angles to the football and make plays that he needs to in the open field. You don't see much of him in coverage, so there are some questions there, but he certainly looks natural when he drops and has the tools to be successful in that area. He brings plenty of special teams experience with him, and that could be the way that he finds his way onto the field early on in his career. There's even there's a lot of potential here, and the production makes him someone that is easy to be excited about, and even if he may not be the highest rated prospect. So definitely a guy that I think as you go along here, could develop into a pretty good player for Carolina. It could be someone that you look at the linebacker position and really turns into, a player that Carolina can value and use in that at that inside linebacker spot, that off-ball linebacker spot, and have plenty of success. That I think that's certainly something that Carolina is looking for. They've had to go to the transfer portal a lot here recently, to get some of their guys at the linebacker position. And so hopefully, this is a guy that's going to be here for a while. Hopefully that's something that we can do, or that you can look at and hopefully, value or keep around here over the next couple of years. Give me just a second, guys. Got something going on right here. Just getting a call from my parents. So let me check to make sure everything is all right. But Tasheem Butler, I think, is definitely a guy that we feel like is going to be a really solid player for the Tar Heels over the next couple of years. Let me go open the door, guys. Little technical difficulties going on here with some of the stuff, so we move on to Chuck Roberts, who ends up flipping his commitment from Carolina, ends up flipping it to Maryland. He was a guy that, for the Tar Heels, they valued very much in this class, and they were hoping that they would be able to hold on to him. That does not end up happening. And so, for Carolina, that definitely is a disappointment. They were hoping to get him on campus here sometime for an official visit. He was supposed to officially visit Chapel Hill last weekend. That did not happen. Instead, he ended up flipping to Maryland, and because he took his official visit there, that happened in the middle, he was on campus last weekend in Chapel Hill. My bad. I got it mixed up. A little thrown off here for a second, but he was on campus last weekend in Chapel Hill. We thought that was going to be sort of to reaffirm his commitment. Did not necessarily know. This one wasn't as known as Tasheem Butler, where he had reported to these other sites that he was taking official visits elsewhere. Chuck Roberts ends up, going on an official visit over the weekend. That was a little bit of a surprise to College Park. And on Friday, in the middle of that official visit, he ends up flipping his commitment. He had been committed to Carolina since December 29th. So their second longest standing commitment behind Skylar Robinson, who is still committed to the class. What a weird scenario that is. Of course, his brother was on the roster, Jason Robinson Jr., last year. But he ended up entering the transfer portal. Skylar's still here, still committed to Carolina at this point. So that is their longest standing commitment as of right now. But Chuck Roberts was right there. He was a guy that you thought was locked in. I thought when I wrote about him and was previewing him as part of the safety group that was taking official visits, even when I previewed him last weekend, never would have thought that he would have ended up flipping. So Maryland did a great job. They clearly turned the heat up here over these last handful of weeks and months, and we're talking to him, trying to get him to flip his commitment, and they were able to get him to campus, and that was what officially did it. The number 580 overall prospect in the class, the number 52 safety in the class, according to Rivals industry rankings, no longer committed. And so now Carolina's attention turns to two different guys. It's Marcus Jones, the 3-star safety who was just on campus this past weekend, and 3-star safety Alan Blackshear, who Carolina will host this weekend for an official visit as of right now. You know, anything can change with these guys. We've seen that plenty of times before. So I would definitely say hold on to that for right now. And let's see if he actually ends up making his official visit to campus. I don't think he's someone that you have to watch out for potentially to head elsewhere. It seems like from everything that I've read leading up to this visit, he is going to make this visit. But, you know, when you look at Marcus Jones, the guy that was just on campus for Carolina, he is a late addition to the official visit ledger. You know, that was a guy that just jumped in a couple of days before visiting last week, and is one that the Tar Heels had some work to do with. He is, you know, a guy that has Ole Miss after him pretty hard. They are the team that appears to be the leader here, especially after his official visit there the weekend of May 29th. But Michigan is lurking as well. The Tar Heels need a great showing if they're going to land his commitment. And so hopefully, hopefully that's something Carolina can do, here in the next handful of days and weeks, is really convince him that he is someone that they value, that they look at as a major piece in this class. And, you know, if they can end up landing him, then maybe they can, land a significant safety. I think that's something that they need right now. And so hopefully that's, that they did what they needed to do on this visit. What's weird is he is not someone that they have necessarily written a whole lot about during this time period. I think, inside Carolina, they've written about a whole bunch of guys here that were on campus over the last, weekend, but he is not one of those guys that they have written about. And so it'll be interesting to see whether or not that is somebody that we get some more information on. If not, then look to Alan Blackshear. Hopefully that's a guy that Carolina can end up landing here, over this weekend. Maybe they, hold him as one of their top priorities. I feel like they look at him as somebody that you absolutely have to, or that you have to value coming into this, because I think they want to add at least one safety. Coleman Bryson is a guy that is going to graduate at the end of the year. There are some other guys in that defensive backfield that are going to probably play safety this year for Carolina that are up there in terms of age. And so this will hopefully be a position where they can land at least one. I was hoping that Carolina could potentially land two here, but maybe they don't. And maybe they have to go into the transfer portal next year. That's definitely a spot that I would keep an eye on for Carolina to hit hard in the transfer portal, try to find someone alongside Gregory Smith, who everybody is reporting is having had a really good spring, really is fitting in well at that safety position now, moving from that hybrid linebacker spot. So hopefully he's somebody that Carolina looks at and values as well. But you definitely want to get at least one commitment here at this spot, if not two commitments at that safety spot. And so we'll see whether or not Carolina is able to do that over this weekend. But yeah, I would say that Alan Blackshear, definitely a guy that has to be prioritized here this week unless they feel that good about Marcus Jones. Again, sorry for the distraction, guys. We got a lot of stuff going on here. We got key cards that don't work. I thought, the family was down at the pool and was going to be able to do the podcast uninterrupted, but just trying to fight through it, and a little bit awkward here, but we'll definitely make sure that the next edition of the podcast on Friday when I'm at home will be a little more straightforward, a little more organized and everything like that. A couple of other updates for you guys. The official visit weekend updates from this past weekend. Just 3 guys that did not officially visit Chapel Hill. There was also 1 guy that Inside Carolina wrote about today that did visit. That was a little bit of a surprise. You do have, and we'll start with him. This was a big one for Carolina to get on campus, a 4-star prospect that I don't think Carolina really thought they were going to be able to, get on campus by any stretch of the imagination. That's 4-star edge rusher Justin Weeks, who, ended up having an open spot on his official visit schedule. And so he decided, why not go to Chapel Hill with that official visit? He said, quote, to Inside Carolina, if you want to get developed, you should definitely go there. So I'm not sure whether or not he's a guy that's going to end up at Carolina, but it seems like they had some sort of effect on him. And that is certainly someone that'll be interesting to monitor here over the next handful of weeks. I think he's in a similar area to some of the other guys that Carolina has in this 2027 class, and from this official visit weekend, some of the higher rated prospects, this was a guy that, as a 4-star prospect was one of the top rated guys on campus. And a lot of those guys, Carolina made advances in their recruitment, but they're not necessarily ready to commit. And so, he really raved about Carolina and the NFL aspect of it. A guy that is 6'5", 250 pounds from Douglas County High School in Douglas County, Georgia. He originally planned to spend the weekend in Columbus, Ohio with Ohio State, but did cancel that trip. And the Buckeyes reportedly are out of the race for him. And so now he does have an official visit that he's going to take this weekend with Georgia Tech. He will also officially visit Kentucky on June 19th, and Clemson was the school that he visited back on May 29th. And so this is one that, just tough to read into what exactly who stands where in this recruitment. Clemson could be a team that holds a little bit of an advantage just because they are a school that has already hosted him. But I would think Georgia Tech probably pushing hard to land his commitment. Same thing with Kentucky, who's done a really good job of recruiting in this 2027 class. And so Carolina's got its work cut out for them. They did what they had to do, at least got themselves on the radar. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see, is there any way possible that Carolina, with how late they entered the running for him, at least with the official visits, is there a way that they were able to stand out? So he'll be a guy that we'll be monitoring over the course of the next couple of weeks as he takes his final official visits. Another update from Inside Carolina earlier today was on Aaron Williams, who said that Carolina is moving ahead of the other schools for sure in his recruitment. Again, it's hard to read into a lot of this stuff when guys take the official visits and then come out with quotes like this, because look, if Carolina was that far ahead, then he would have ended up committing. So it's good. It's a good sign that Carolina is showing him what he needs to be shown. It's just he's probably going to wait until the end of the month and then make some sort of decision about either a decision date that'll come on later this summer, or he'll be a guy that will decide there soon. But that's one of Carolina's top linebacker targets. That's another spot that Carolina is really fiending to get somebody in the fold alongside of Tasheem Butler for. So hopefully Carolina, can end up landing his commitment when it's all said and done. Big part of that is that you do have 4-star linebacker Theo Wilson, who was supposed to visit over the weekend. Same thing with 3-star interior offensive lineman Ronald Trey Moore, who have tentatively rescheduled for this upcoming weekend. But there is some negative vibes around both of these guys. It feels like, according to Inside Carolina, there's a good chance that Carolina doesn't end up getting those official visits from these guys. They ended up switching some official visits that they had later on in the schedule into last week. And so now it ultimately depends on whether or not they visit Chapel Hill this weekend. Theo Wilson, a guy that right now Louisville is a team that is in a really good spot for him. Virginia also hosted him for an official visit, so definitely a team to keep an eye out for there. And Ronald Moore is a guy that I think, Carolina, with the guys that they've landed 2 commitments already at the interior offensive line spot, I think that might be playing a part in why he may not necessarily be heading for Chapel Hill, although Carolina is still recruiting other guys hard. Neil Roberts is a guy that says that Carolina did a really good job during their official visit with him. So maybe that's somebody that ends up eventually landing there. And actually, Ronald Moore, just realized this. I had laid the podcast out earlier in the week and for some reason didn't go back and check on this before we got to the podcast, but he actually committed over the weekend to Pittsburgh. And so he is officially off the table for this weekend. Now we just see whether or not Theo Wilson is going to be taking his official visit. That would be a nice one for Carolina. Again, another one that they jumped in on late out of Tampa, Florida, but definitely would be somebody that Carolina would love to get in the fold at that linebacker position. Very highly rated, and certainly a guy that I think, as we've gone along here in the official visit process, kind of wondered why it was just Virginia and Carolina that were recruiting him. Now we've seen some other schools that have jumped into the running that show you this is a big-time recruitment, and certainly one that Carolina needs to take seriously. Another guy who was supposed to be on campus this past weekend, 3-star interior offensive lineman Juwan Graham. He canceled his official visit prior to this past weekend. The feeling is that it may have been mutual. It may have been that Carolina is looking at other targets at the interior offensive line spot to fill what might be 1-2 more spots that they're willing to take, at the interior offensive line, along the interior offensive line, rather. So hopefully, there is some good news on that front. Graham, guy that was pretty lowly rated anyways, and so he is going to take the time to look elsewhere and try to find somewhere that he can ultimately fit in. All right, now we get to the news that I think a lot of you guys have been waiting for here on this edition of the podcast. Of course, make sure you guys go back, check out the breakdown of Noah Spinks and Shavezz Dixon if you haven't checked that out yet. But we have some news on the freshman enrollment side of things. Carolina, of course, having some guys that are going to enroll here later than the guys that enrolled during the winter semester, got on campus early and were a part of spring practice. 6 of the 9 players that have signed and enrolled late from the 2026 class are officially enrolled as of right now. That would be 3-star defensive lineman Jimmy Jimmy Alu Suliafau. You've got 3-star edge rusher Ashton Blatt, who is also committed to Carolina, that has enrolled. 3-star offensive tackle Nick Fiamura, 3-star interior offensive lineman Zion Smith, 3-star tight end Dream Rashad, who was, of course, a late addition to the class in the early signing period. And then 3-star offensive lineman Christian Alvarez, who is an addition during the regular signing period for Carolina. All of those guys are on campus, are enrolled, and will be a part of the program here over the summer. You've got 3-star offensive lineman DeJuan Davis, who was a late add for Carolina in the 2026 class. He will enroll and join the team later this summer, so he's going to be a guy that's going to join them right before fall camp. That's somebody that I don't expect to have a major impact this upcoming season. Really, all of these guys probably going to be very difficult for them to have a major impact. Alu Saliafau is a guy who was a high-end 3-star. Same thing with Ashton Blatt, so you never know with those guys. But they are behind the 8 ball. They are going to have to learn some things, in terms of the playbook and everything that these guys, that were a part of this 40-man class that enrolled early were able to learn while they were on campus in the spring. Also adjusting to the college level. Both of those guys are guys that will be playing on the defensive line. They have to adjust to the level of physicality, how things go in college just in general. It is probably going to take those guys some time. So wouldn't be shocked if they are guys that take a year or two to be able to have an effect for Carolina. But the guy that everybody is worried about, and that we got news on this from inside Carolina, they did report that 4-star wide receiver commit Keon Chapman is, quote, expected to be cleared and enrolled any day now. And this is huge news for Carolina. Really one of the best players that Carolina landed in this last class. When I looked at him, I thought he was a guy that could be a number 1 receiver for Carolina eventually along the way. And you got the news that he really, that he was not going to enroll. He was someone that was originally scheduled to enroll with the team in the winter. But due to what many expect to be academics, he did not enroll at Carolina. And so it seems like he's done whatever he's had to do off the field. His goal, I think, the entire way was to end up with Carolina, where it feels like Dayron Parks, who is a 3-star, high-end 3-star interior offensive lineman, is not going to land with Carolina. That is still the case according to Inside Carolina. Nothing has changed there. He will not enroll with the program. And so, this is bad news on that front. I thought he was somebody that was going to be able to have an effect for Carolina, potentially find his way on, at least, as a 3rd-string type of guy, maybe even a 2nd-string type player on the interior of that offensive line. But that is not going to happen. But when you look at Chapman, he's a guy 6'5", 215 pounds, has a really nice frame and uses it well to box out defensive backs and catch the ball as he's absorbing contact. After the catch, the frame combines with the physicality that he plays with to actually catch the football, and he has reliable his frame combines with the physicality to allow him to shed tackles and pick up very important yards after the catch. When it comes to actually catching the football, has pretty reliable hands and has a big catch radius that allows him to haul in just about anything that is thrown his way. Prior to catching the ball, does a really good job of creating separation with some promising speed and his polished route running, with a route tree that is as full as just about any receiver in this class. So very, very far along in terms of the technical areas of the game, exactly where you need him to be if he's going to have an early effect at Carolina. The thing is that it's going to be difficult this year to get him on the field and have him playing a big role, because he does have so much that he has to learn. He has so much that he has to catch up on once he gets into Carolina. But in terms of the pure talent, I think he's a guy that has a chance to be one of the next great receivers for the Tar Heels. That's what I wrote about him when he ended up committing. So I think this is a huge addition for Carolina to the wide receiving core. They're in good shape, I think, right now. When you look at the wide receivers that are currently on the roster, where, you expect guys to contribute this year, I think it was going to be tough for him probably to contribute with the guys that are already there anyways. I think you're looking at some more veteran guys that are going to be taking the snaps early on to start the season. Of course, Jordan Shipp. He's a guy that, is a junior, but there's a good chance he could be gone at the end of the season. So recruiting that wide receiver position was still very important. Trek Kekauna is going to be the guy more than likely in the slot. There were a lot of people. You heard Andrew Jones when he was on with us in one of the recent editions of the podcast. He talked about how he's a guy that's going to be used in the run game as well. When he brought his name up, it seemed like he was somebody that's going to be entrenched in this offense. So I would not be shocked if he's the starting receiver for Carolina in the slot. And then Mason Humphrey, a guy that we've heard a lot about. They've been coaching him very hard in practice. Any of the reviews of practice that I've heard from inside Carolina, from Tar Heel 24/7, they've talked about how wide receivers coach Garrett McGee has been all over Mason Humphrey, but it is expected that he would be the number 2 wide receiver if the season started today. So it is going to be a relatively veteran group that is going to lead Carolina out of the gate at wide receiver. But you never know. Keon Chapman could be a guy that ends up factoring in later on in the season. I mean, remember last year we saw as they got to the 4th game of the season, once they got to that game against Central Florida, you started seeing some new names thrown in there, like Shenard Clower, who is no longer with the program, like Madrid Tucker, who played a role for Carolina, in the middle of last season at that wide receiver spot. And these are guys that don't have nearly the star rating that the guys that Carolina brought in this class have. I mean, you're talking about 4-star wide receiver in Carnell Warren, who flashed in camp and is certainly a guy that could be playing a role for Carolina at some point. CJ Sadler, another guy who flashed on the field, has to make sure that he's doing the things off the field that he needs to be doing, but that's a 4-star prospect. One of the top-rated players, I think. When I was breaking down the class, I had him as the best player for Carolina in that 2026 class, just in terms of what I saw from him on tape. That guy's going to be in the fold. Same thing with Keon Chapman. So definitely a healthy group of wide receivers, much better than the group that Carolina had last year surrounding Jordan Shipp. I think eventually these guys will be better than the guys that Carolina is probably going to start to begin the year. But I think with their talent, you never know. They could end up finding their way onto the field here sooner rather than later. But, that's the updates that we have for you guys. Make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, read a little bit more about Noah Spinks. I did a breakdown of his film a little more in-depth than we talked about even here on the podcast. So make sure you go check that out, read a little bit about the stats from his junior season, which are very, very good, as I told you earlier. And then do the same for Shavezz Dixon. We got a breakdown of him on the website that you can go back to and read as well. Broke down his film as we dissected here during the podcast. So make sure that you guys are reading those articles. Really helps us out when you guys do that. Of course, we do have the article up there about Tasheem Butler reaffirming his commitment, a little more information on him if you want to know about it. And then the same thing with the Chuck Roberts flip. We tell you a little bit more about where Carolina should go now after losing the commitment from one of their top players committed in the 2027 class. Of course, we will have an article going up sometime on Friday morning, hoping to get that out. I am going to be on the road on that day, so I may actually put it out Thursday night for you guys just so that it's up. That will preview the official visit weekend that Carolina has coming up this weekend. The June 12th is going to be another big official visit weekend, some 4-star prospects that Carolina really, really wants. And so I definitely think that it's going to be another one of those weekends that Carolina really values. They've done a really good job so far in the first 2 weekends. Hopefully they can land a few more commits here from it, but it seems like there are some glowing reviews from what they've done. It's just a matter of getting some guys across the finish line, but we'll have you covered on all of the guys that are going to be on campus this weekend in that article, where their recruitment stand going into the weekend, so that you guys can get a feeling for what exactly Carolina's chances are with each one of those prospects. And then, of course, any coverage that is needed out of that, whether there are commitments. Again, I am on a family vacation, so it might be a little bit delayed at certain times, but the guys that have made their announcements here recently, they've worked very well into the windows where I've been able to get stuff up about them. So, again, the best place to keep an eye on all of the latest recruiting-wise, as well as any news around the football program in general, just head over to HeelToughBlog.com for all of the latest news. Same thing on the basketball side of things. Again, this week, probably going to be quiet. Maybe there's something that we end up doing on Friday when I get back, but I will have to see. But definitely some news that, still could be coming out around the roster. Carolina talking to Oregon transfer Wee Lin, potentially about filling what could be the last spot on the roster. There could be 2 scholarships still available, but we have that article up there on the website. Josh wrote that for you late last week, so make sure you go and check that out. And any other news that comes out around the roster or anything else involving Carolina basketball, we will have you covered over there on the Heel Tough blog website. In terms of the podcast and everything like that, both podcasts are in the same location when it comes to the video side of things. So just go over to the Twitter page at Heel Tough Blog. Give us a follow over there. Also turn on post notifications, because the only things that we post on the Heel Tough Blog page are our content. So the articles, the video editions of the podcast, any of that kind of stuff, it's all there on Heel Tough Blog, on the Heel Tough Blog Twitter. Make sure you go over to the Facebook page, give us a like over there as well. That's another direct stream to our content. It's just our content that's on that page. So when you like that, it'll show up in your Facebook feed for you guys whenever we post a new article or go live on an edition of the podcast. And then one thing that we're really hammering home, guys, it helps us out as we try to look for sponsors, is that YouTube page. Go over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, and you'll get our live editions of the podcast here on the Heel Tough Blog podcast and the Four Corners podcast. Those live editions as well will be over there whenever we hit that go live button. It'll show up there. And so the best thing you can do is subscribe. You'll be able to get notifications whenever we go live so that you don't miss any episodes. And again, it really helps us with sponsorships in terms of the subscriber number. That's the main thing that we're trying to get up. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please go over there and give us a subscription. We would greatly appreciate that. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening to this edition of the podcast. And as always, go Tar Heels.